There's a fair amount of research trying to figure out what exactly determines hashtag popularity. Some think it's conciseness and clarity, while others, like sociolinguists, believe that gender and political stance shape your hashtag choice. But those studies are flawed. Many look at a massive mix of hashtags across different years and events. Those familiar with statistics will know that this noisiness in datasets often leads to incorrect analysis. For a clear picture, we need to compare hashtags with the same stance within the same event. So in this study, we're digging into what makes hashtags popular in English and French. To do that, we're using election datasets, a goldmine for what we call partisan hashtags, ones showing support or opposition for specific candidates. By looking at hashtags that take the same political stance within the same election event, we see which formats resonate more with each language group. So we picked two datasets, the 2019 Canadian election and the 2017 French election. A big reason for choosing the Canadian dataset is that it lets us directly compare French and English hashtags used by Canadian voters. This way, we can see if there are any distinct patterns between the two groups. Now, based on certain sociolinguistic theories, we might expect Canadian French hashtagging to look a lot like Canadian English, right? Because during a Canadian election, French-speaking Canadians would be engaging mostly with English-speaking Canadians, instead of with French speakers in France, and would adopt some of their habits. But as we'll explore, that's not quite what is happening. First, some background on these elections. The 43rd Canadian election took place in October 2019. Bloc Québécois, or BQ for short, advocates for Quebec's independence and was a major player among French-speaking voters. Most hashtags related to the BQ are in French. As for the French election, the first round took place in April 2017, and the second round was held in May. Our analysis kicked off with a big difference in how French and English speakers use verb moods. French-speaking voters favor the indicative mood, while English speakers prefer the imperative. Now, if you need a quick refresher, the imperative mood is a command, like vote for X, while the indicative is descriptive, like I'm voting for X. The distinction in verb mood between Canadian English and French is especially noticeable for the verbs vote and choose. You can see that French voters talk about themselves voting or voting for someone, whereas Canadian English voters don't talk about themselves but instead tell others to simply vote or vote for someone. The same thing happens with the verb choose. Canadians love telling others what to choose, while French people mostly talk about who they are choosing. This is intriguing. Why do French people love the indicative mood so much? Is it cause they are nicer and don't like telling others what to do, contrary to the stereotype that Canadians are overly nice? In defense of Canadians, I have 3 points to show that the French preferring indicative mood probably has nothing to do with niceness. The first point is that indicative hashtags Je vote bloc and On vote bloc are the second and third most popular partisan hashtags for the French-speaking Canadian party BQ, while imperative hashtags for BQ almost never appear. So, if we were to believe that there is some inherent psychological reason behind the French preferring indicative mood, then it proves that Canadian French speakers are much nicer than English speakers, which I don't believe is true. The second point is that Treebank statistics did show that French users favor the indicative mood more than English users, but the difference is much less significant. The third point is that the predominance of indicative mood in French partisan hashtags seems to be recent. In fact, back in 2012, the imperative hashtag Vote Hollande was the fourth most popular hashtag, while the most popular indicative hashtag Je me souviens was the 39th most popular, the exact opposite of the current trend. Their preference for indicative mood probably has nothing to do with niceness, unless we believe that there is some big personality shift among French people within a small time span of 5 years. So, what's the most likely explanation here? The one I can think of is that it all started with a single event, a shooting incident, to be specific. The spike in the use of the indicative mood could be connected to the popularity of Je suis Charlie, the viral hashtag that sparked countless Je suis variations. This wave of hashtags potentially made French users use the indicative mood more often. So it's not really about some deep cultural difference. It's more about people picking up on a popular format and sticking with it. This behavior of mimicking a popular hashtag format is further proved by the analysis of noun phrases. For noun phrases, we quickly see that just like verb phrases, BQ's partisan noun phrase hashtags follow the typical French election patterns, rather than mimicking those of other Canadian parties with similar political stances. For the hashtag format, candidate or party followed by election year, we see that this format is viral in among French voters. In fact, Marine 2017 and JLM 2017 are the top two partisan hashtags in the French dataset. Bloc 2019 is the most popular partisan hashtag related to BQ. This phenomenon has been persistent across elections so far. 5 candidates in the first round of the 2017 election, including Fillon and Hamon, adopted this format as their official campaign logo. Back in 2012, most of the candidates in the first round of elections chose this format as their campaign logo. However, this format isn't popular at all in English. In fact, the top 2 hashtags of this format, PPC 2019 and NDP 2019, rank only 20th and 176th, respectively, among all the hashtags. The next thing we compare is the omission of the preposition for, or pour in French. French hashtags dropped this preposition during the 2017 election. As an example, Fillon Président is the 35th most popular hashtag in the dataset. This particular format wasn't popular back in the 2012 election, so its recent surge is likely influenced by Marine Le Pen's campaign logo, Marine Présidente. The most popular hashtag that does not omit the preposition pour from the constituent pour président is Marine Le Pen pour Présidente, and it only appeared twice. Meanwhile, Marine Présidente appeared over 23,000 times. Conversely, Canadian English voters do not omit the preposition for. Sheer PM only appeared once in the dataset, while sheer for PM appeared over 22,000 times and is the 28th most popular hashtag in the dataset. The third thing is that French-speaking voters love the combination of common nouns with proper nouns as partisan hashtags, such as Soutien Fillon or Pays QC, which was BQ's official campaign hashtag. This structure doesn't show up much in English. All these 3 differences mentioned above in noun phrases probably aren't due to any deep linguistic reason. This is especially true for the omission of prepositions in French, as it only recently became popular, and it was likely caused by one popular candidate adopting the new format and supporters of other candidates adopting this format as well to engage in keyboard politics. So what determines hashtag popularity? Is it conciseness? Probably not. If conciseness had been a deterministic factor, imperative hashtags should have always dominated over indicative ones, as opposed to what we just saw with French hashtags. It is clarity, then? Also hard to justify with the data available. There are many ambiguous hashtags in our datasets that dominate over their less ambiguous counterparts. For example, the ambiguous hashtag ChooseForward dominated Vote Liberal in popularity, even though the latter is both shorter and more clear. What we're seeing is that when there are pre-existing viral hashtags with a certain syntactic format, there's a sudden surge of similar hashtags following that format. We see this in French with the preference for the indicative mood and the dropping of prepositions. So, what we can conclude is that a hashtag's popularity is driven by whether there are already popular hashtags with a similar format within the same language. This is especially clear when you look at the partisan hashtags from the French-speaking BQ party in Canada. These hashtags follow the same syntactic pattern as those in the French election, instead of copying the hashtags from other Canadian parties with similar political views. So what's the takeaway? It appears that we often subconsciously copy others, rather than selecting what might objectively be best for us.